The rain pounded the eaves, and I sat in the kitchen of my small third-floor apartment, poring over old photographs. One of them showed a young me in a maid's uniform at the Magnolia Hotel, 19 years old, eyes bright with enthusiasm. I'm 73 now, and I'm a far cry from that naive girl in the picture. My name is Vernice Battle, and I've given 54 years of my life to the hotel business. From maid to manager of a small hotel in suburban Memphis, my path has been long and thorny. Many in my shoes would have just broken down. But not me. Even now in my third year of retirement, I sometimes wake up feeling like I need to check to see if guest check-in is in order, if there are enough clean towels, if some conflict needs to be resolved. The phone rang, pulling me out of my memories. I looked at the screen. Torrance, my only son. I couldn't say I was excited. Lately, our conversations had become a formality, a ritual we both performed without much enthusiasm. Yes, Torrance, I answered, trying to sound neutral. Mom, did you remember that Sunday is Glenn's birthday? Torrance's voice sounded distant and a little annoyed, as if the fact that he had to call me made him uncomfortable. Glenn is my grandson, turning 14. He's a sweet boy, though lately he's been looking more and more like his father, just as cold and calculating. Rowena, Torrance's wife, did her best to make sure he grew up with a sense of superiority over others. I still loved Glenn, though. After all, he didn't choose his parents. Of course I remember Torrance. I already bought him a present. Don't get him any more of those old-fashioned things like last time, Torrance interjected. Rowena had been horrified by that vinyl record collection. I gritted my teeth. Last birthday, I'd given Glenn a collector's edition of classical music on vinyl that had cost me 3 of my pensions. Apparently that wasn't cool enough for Rowena. I got him something more modern this time, I lied. In fact, I bought him a book about the great jazz musicians. Glenn was beginning to take an interest in music, and I hoped to encourage him. Well, hopefully. Rowena organized a party at that new club on Fifth Avenue. All his classmates and their parents will be there. Be there at 3. He didn't even ask if it was a convenient time. Didn't ask how I was feeling, even though he knew I'd been catching a lot of colds lately. I will, I said briefly. After the conversation, I sat at the window for a long time, looking at the rain-wet city. What had happened to my son? When did he turn into this cold, calculating man who talks to his mother like an annoying neighbor? I remembered him as a little boy with perpetually soiled knees, rushing toward me when I came home from work. I remembered him as a teenager, insecure, searching for himself. And then he met Rowena, and everything changed.
Rowena Kingsley was the kind of woman who knew what she wanted and went for it. Beautiful, intelligent, ambitious, she was studying at a prestigious university and planned to become a lawyer. What she found in my Torrance, who was then working as a programmer for a small company, I never understood. But it was as if she saw potential in him that I, his mother, didn't see.
Or maybe just a convenient tool to realize her own ambitions. After the wedding, Torrance quickly moved up the career ladder, became a department head, then moved to a large company to a position with a big name and a decent salary. They bought a house in a prestigious neighborhood, began to go on expensive vacations, and with each step up, Torrance grew more and more distant from me, and Rowena only seemed to encourage it. I was never good enough for her. A hotel manager? Just an attendant in her eyes, despite my experience and professionalism. My small apartment in an old house, my unfashionable outfits, my habits, all of it, held Rowena in barely concealed contempt. Vernice, you should finally move into a nursing home. They'll take better care of you there than you can take care of yourself. I noticed the dust on the bookshelves yesterday. It's hard to keep things clean at your age, she said with fake concern in her voice when she came to my house, which was less and less often. I rejected all her offers of help, and that only seemed to make her dislike me more and more. Torrance simply acquiesced, occasionally casting me guilty glances, but never speaking up for me. I remember that awful Christmas dinner when Rowena started discussing nursing homes with her sister at the table, as if I wasn't even there. It's just unbearable, she said as she put her salad on. Torrance has to check every week to make sure everything's okay in her apartment, and you know how much work he has. Last week, she thought someone was trying to break in her door. We called the police, spent the whole evening, and it was just a neighbor's cat scratching around. That doesn't seem plausible to me, as I didn't call any police, I interjected then, unable to stand it. Rowena didn't even look embarrassed, just exchanged a meaningful glance with her sister that clearly said, "See, her memory is starting to fail." After that dinner, I didn't speak to them for almost a month. Then Torrance called and apologized. Not for his wife, of course, but because I had misunderstood. I accepted his apology because, after all, he was my son, my family, but our relationship could never be the same again. I put the pictures aside and got up to make myself some tea. My chest constricted again, and I coughed lightly at first, then harder and harder, until tears welled up in my eyes. The cold I'd gotten a week ago wasn't going away, despite all my home remedies. Perhaps I should have gone to the doctor, but I didn't like hospitals and clinics. For too many years, I'd watched the medical profession treat the elderly with barely concealed irritation or worse, patronizing pity. I spent the next 2 days in bed, getting up periodically to drink medicine or make myself broth. My temperature rose, and it became increasingly difficult to breathe. On the third day, I decided to call a doctor at home. The young doctor examined me, listened to my lungs, and frowned. "Mrs. Battle, you have a serious pneumonia. You need to go to the hospital." "I'm not going to the hospital," I said firmly. "Just give me my medication and I'll take it at home." The doctor tried to insist, but I was adamant. In the end, he gave up, wrote a bunch of prescriptions, and strictly told me to call him again if my condition worsened. "And you need someone to look after you," he added, standing in the doorway. "Do you have any relatives?" I nodded.
The thought of asking Torrance and Rowena for help was unpleasant, but there seemed to be no choice. I called my son as soon as the doctor left. "Mom?" Torrance sounded surprised. I rarely called him myself. "Is something wrong?" "I have pneumonia," I said bluntly. "The doctor says I need care." I thought, ugh, maybe you could stop by, pick up some medicine from the pharmacy.
I left my prescriptions on the table in the hallway. There was a pause. "Are you at the hospital?" "No, I refuse to go. I'm going to be treated at home." There was another pause, and then I heard Torrance say something to the side, probably to Rowena. "Mom?" His voice became serious, almost businesslike. "You can't stay alone with pneumonia. It's dangerous. I'll come and take you to our place. We have a guest room. Rowena will take care of you." I started to protest. The thought of living under the same roof as Rowena seemed horrible. But Torrance was adamant, and frankly, I was getting worse. Maybe he was right. "All right," I finally gave in. "Just bring me a warm robe and slippers." He arrived 2 hours later, helped me pack the essentials, put me in his expensive car, and drove me to their spacious house on the outskirts of Memphis. I watched the streets float by and thought that maybe our relationship could still be saved. Maybe this illness was a chance to bond with my son, to show Rowena that I wasn't such a burden. How wrong I was. The guest room in their house was small and uncomfortable, with minimalist furniture and a window overlooking the blank wall of the neighbor's house.
Rowena greeted me with a strained smile and immediately began to tell me about the inconveniences she'd had to overcome to get the room ready for me. We were planning to turn it into a home office for Torrance, and we'd already ordered the furniture. "Now we'll have to put it on hold," she said, adjusting the cushions on the narrow bed. "But that's all right. Family comes first, don't it, darling?"
Torrance nodded absently, already immersed in his phone. The first few days weren't too bad. I mostly slept, fighting a high fever. Torrance left for work early in the morning and returned late at night, so we hardly ever crossed paths. Rowena stopped by 3 times a day to bring me food, medicine, and pick up dishes. Our conversations were short and formal, but as I began to feel better and started to leave the room, the tension in the house became palpable. Rowena clearly wasn't ready for me to use their kitchen or sit in the living room. Every time I left my room, she found me some activity that required me to return to myself. Vernice, I was just about to vacuum in here. Why don't you rest in your room? I'll bring you some tea when I'm done. Or, oh, Vernice, Torrance and I were just about to discuss some personal matters. Would you mind if we were alone? Glenn, my grandson, was at school most of the day and locked himself in his room with his computer in the evenings. When we did cross paths, he would mumble a brief greeting and hurried past as if he was afraid I would hold him up for conversation. One morning, about 2 weeks after I moved in, I overheard Torrance and Rowena talking in the kitchen. How long is she going to stay here? Rowena's voice sounded annoyed. I can't live like this anymore. She leaves her stuff everywhere, occupies the bathroom for an hour, watches those awful old movies at full volume. What do you suggest? Torrance asked tiredly. Kick her out on the street? Of course not, Rowena said indignantly. But we could find a suitable boarding house for her. That new one, Sunny Beach, looks very nice, and it has medical staff. She'll refuse, you know that. Torrance, your mother is 73 years old. She can't live alone in her old apartment where the elevator doesn't even work properly. And she can't live with us all the time either. That's not an option. There was a pause. Her apartment, Torrance said thoughtfully. What if we offered to let her sign the apartment over to us? In exchange for care and nurturing. That would be fair. After all, we can't afford to keep her for nothing. We have our own expenses. I froze in the hallway, unable to believe my ears. So this is what they're trying to accomplish? My apartment is a small 2-bedroom in an old but solid building in a good neighborhood, not far from the center. I bought it 30 years ago with my savings and paid off the loan for almost 20 years. It was the only really valuable possession I had, aside from the small savings in my bank account. That's a thought. Rowena's voice became interested. But how do I get her to agree? She's vulnerable right now, Torrance said so coldly it sent chills down my spine. Sick, it's up to us. If we present it right, the care, the security, the ability to not worry about the future. I quietly went back to my room and sat on my bed, trying to make sense of what I'd heard. My own son was discussing how to manipulate me to get my apartment, and his wife was in full support of the plan. I became dizzy, not from the illness, but from the realization of how low my own family had fallen.
At that moment, I decided that I had to return home immediately despite my illness. But then another thought crossed my mind. What if I played along? Let them know that their plan worked, and then what would happen, I didn't know. But for the first time in years, I felt energized and determined to act, not just go with the flow. At dinner, Torrance started talking about my future.
He spoke softly, with feigned concern in his voice, about how much it pained him to see me living alone in my unfit apartment, how he and Rowena worried about my safety and health. Mom, you have to realize that at your age, it's dangerous to live alone, he said, not looking me in the eye. What if you get sick again or fall? Who will help you? I have neighbors, I tried to object, but Rowena immediately intervened. Neighbors? Vernice, are you serious? Mrs. Parker is 80 years old, and the Andersons are at work all day long. Who's going to help you if something happens at 3 in the morning? I remained silent, pretending to think about what she was saying. We have a suggestion, Torrance continued, exchanging a glance with his wife. What if you moved in with us permanently? We'll set up a room for you. You'll be under supervision. You'll always be able to see Glenn. What about my apartment? I asked innocently. Oh, don't worry about that, Rowena said hastily. We can rent it out, and the money will be used to support you. Or we could sell it, and you'd have a financial cushion. Or, Torrance interjected, you could sign it over to us. After all, we're your family, and you know, we'll still have it. And this way you can rest assured that you'll be taken care of for the rest of your life. I lowered my eyes as if pondering their proposal. In fact, I was seething with anger and pain, but I held back and just nodded. I'll think about it, I said quietly. This is a big decision. Rowena and Torrance looked at each other with ill-concealed triumph. They thought the game was already won, that I was an old, sick woman with nowhere to go and no one to rely on but them. How wrong they were. The next morning, Rowena knocked on the door of my room, holding a tray of breakfast. Usually, she just set the food on the nightstand and left. But today, she lingered, perched on the edge of the bed, with a caring smile that didn't reach her eyes. How are you feeling, Vernice? She asked, holding out a cup of tea to me. A little better, I replied, trying to sound weaker than I really was. In fact, the pneumonia was receding, and I could breathe almost freely. Thank you for your concern, Rowena. That's all Torrance and I want, to take care of you. She stroked the covers on my bed. Have you thought about our offer? About moving in with us? I made a thoughtful face as I sipped my tea. Been thinking all night. It's a big decision, you know. My apartment, I lived there for almost 30 years. So many memories. Oh, I understand, Rowena said quickly, though I could see that she didn't really care about my sentimental attachments. But think of the practical side. You can't live there alone anymore. It's just dangerous. And here you'll have a family, care, security. I sighed, as if giving up. Maybe you're right, but I'm worried about the financial side of things. I don't want to be a burden on you and Torrance. That's what we talked about yesterday, Rowena said, something greedy in her eyes. If you signed the apartment over to us, that would solve everything. We could rent it out or sell it, and the money would go to support you. What if I just moved in with you but kept the apartment? Rowena's face froze for a moment, but she quickly pulled herself together. Of course, that's an option too, but think of the expense, Vernice. Utility bills for an empty apartment, taxes, and what if something breaks down in there? Who's going to take care of it? You'll have to go there, you'll have to check it out. That's stress that you don't need at your age. I chuckled inwardly. Rowena had been so careful to avoid the main question. Why wouldn't they just help me unselfishly, out of love and respect? Because that wasn't an option for them. They wanted something in return, and that something was my apartment. I understand, I said slowly. You're probably right. I'll sign the papers. Rowena glowed. Really? That's wonderful. Torrance will be so pleased. I'll tell him to get the papers ready.
We have a notary we know who can come right here. She jumped up, forgetting her role as caring daughter-in-law, and almost ran out of the room. I heard her hurriedly dialing someone's number in the hallway. I slowly ate the breakfast I had brought and pondered my decision. Did I have a choice? I could have refused, gone back to my apartment, and lived there alone.
But something told me that Torrance and Rowena wouldn't leave me alone. They would begin a siege, phone calls expressing concern, surprise visits to check on my condition, conversations with neighbors about me getting weird. Torrance returned from work earlier than usual, clearly excited by the news Rowena had told him. He walked into my room with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, as fake as his wife's. Mom, Rowena said you're in agreement. Is that true? I nodded. Yes, Torrance, I have thought about it. And you are right. It's not safe to live alone at my age, and I don't want to be a burden to you. If my apartment will help cover my living expenses, that's fair enough. He sat down next to me and patted my arm awkwardly. You're making the right decision, Mom. Rowena and I will take care of you, I promise. I could see relief and impatience in his eyes. He was already mentally calculating how much they would get for my apartment. It hurt deeper than I expected. Even knowing he was self-serving, I still hoped to see a drop of genuine feeling. I called Lawson, the notary we know. Torrance continued. He can be here tomorrow morning. I've already prepared all the documents. All you have to do is sign. The next morning, the notary arrived at 10 o'clock sharp. Mr. Lawson was a tall, gaunt man with thinning hair and a keen eye. He quickly laid out the papers on the coffee table in the living room, where Torrance had helped me move from the bedroom. Now, Mrs. Battle, Lawson began in a formal tone, we have before us a deed of gift of your apartment in the name of your son, Torrance Battle, and his wife, Rowena Battle. Do you understand the essence of this contract? I nodded slowly. I'm giving them my apartment. That is correct. Once this document is signed and registered, you will no longer be the owner of the property. All rights to it will pass to your son and his wife. Do you understand that? And are you doing this voluntarily? I looked at Torrance and Rowena, who were standing nearby, barely containing their impatience. Then I shifted my gaze to the notary. I do this in exchange for their care and nurturing for the rest of my days. They promised that I would live with them and they would take care of me. Mr. Lawson frowned slightly. The document doesn't say anything about that, Mrs. Battle. It's just a deed of gift without any conditions. Of course, Mother. Torrance quickly intervened, casting an irritated glance at the notary. It's just a formality. Rowena and I gave you our word. You know we would never leave you. I pretended to think about it, as if weighing his words. Then I nodded slowly. Okay, I believe you. Mr. Lawson held out a pen to me and pointed to where I needed to sign. I deliberately held my hand so that it trembled slightly as I signed. Let them think I was weak and helpless. The change in their attitude toward me began almost immediately. The next day, Rowena brought me breakfast later than usual, and instead of fresh scrambled eggs and toast, it was plain porridge and milk. Torrance stopped coming to see me in the evenings to ask how I was feeling, and when I went out into the living room to sit for a while, Rowena no longer pretended that she had to vacuum this particular area in a hurry. A week after the papers were signed, Torrance came into my room with a serious look on his face. Mom, Rowena and I wanted to talk to you, he began, standing in the doorway. I put aside the book I was reading. About what, dear? We've been thinking about your situation for a long time. He rubbed his hands together nervously. And we've come to the conclusion that you need more specialized care than we can provide. Rowena works all day, and so do I. Glenn's at school. You spend a lot of time alone, and it's not safe. I listened silently, already realizing where he was going with this. We've found a great place for you, a boarding house called Quiet Harbor. It has medical staff, organized recreation, and the company of other people your age. You'll be much better off there than here. A boarding house? I asked quietly. But we agreed that I would live with you. Torrance looked away. The situation has changed, Mother. Rowena and I just can't give you the care you need. At the boarding house, professionals will take care of you. What about your promise? I let my voice waver. You said you'd take care of me for the rest of my life. We are, Torrance exclaimed. We've found the best place for you, where you'll get everything you need. We'll visit you, of course, every week. I lowered my head as if giving up. When? We've already organized everything. They're expecting you there tomorrow. So soon? The sooner you move there, the sooner you'll adapt. He paused. One more thing. You won't have to worry about your stuff from the apartment. Rowena and I have decided to sell it. The money will go to pay for the boarding house. Quiet Harbor turned out to be a two-story building of gray concrete with small windows and a shabby facade. Around there was a small plot fenced with a simple metal fence. It couldn't even be called a garden, but rather a piece of land with stunted grass and a couple of shabby benches. I was greeted at the entrance by a full, middle-aged woman in a white coat with a name tag that read, Administrator Patricia Wilkins. "Welcome to Quiet Harbor, Mrs. Battle," she said with a professional smile that didn't affect her eyes. "We've been expecting you. Your son has already paid the first month's rent and filled out the necessary forms." She led me inside, telling me the rules of the boarding house on the way. Wake up at 6 in the morning, breakfast at 7, lunch at 12, dinner at 6 in the evening. Visitors only on weekends, phone calls no later than 8 in the evening. "Here's your room," Patricia said, opening a door at the end of a long hallway with shabby walls. I stepped in and froze. It was a small room with a single narrow window overlooking the wall of a neighboring building. A bed with a crumpled mattress, a nightstand, an old closet, and a stumpy chair. The walls had once been white, but now they were yellowish. There was a dark leak stain in the corner. "The bathroom is at the end of the hallway, shared by 4 rooms," Patricia continued. "The television is in the common living room on the first floor. The laundry room is open on Tuesdays and Fridays. Your linens will be changed once a week." She handed me the room key. "Lunch is in an hour. Don't be late. They don't give food to latecomers. See you later, Mrs. Battle." The door closed, and I was alone in the shabby room that was now supposed to be my home. I slowly sank down onto the creaky bed, feeling a wave of despair rising inside. Was this really it? Would this be the end of my life in this dreary room, next door to other forgotten old people, overseen by indifferent staff? I felt tears come to my eyes, not from self-pity, but from pure, all-consuming rage. How dare they? How dare Torrance and Rowena send me here, to this God-forsaken place, after all I'd done for them, after all the years of love, care, support? I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket and dialed Gerda's number. I had to get out of here. I had only lived at Quiet Harbor for a week when everything changed. That morning I sat in the common living room, staring blankly at the TV screen, which was playing some meaningless show. My mood was lousy. Torrance and Rowena hadn't shown up for the weekend like they'd promised. I hadn't expected them to, though. Once they got what they wanted, they'd just thrown me out of their lives. Patricia, the receptionist, approached me with an unusually serious expression on her face. "Mrs. Battle, there's a phone call for you. It's the law firm of Stevenson and Associates. They say it's urgent." I stood up in surprise and followed her to the landline at the front desk. What could some law firm possibly need from me? Could it be something to do with my apartment? I picked up the phone. "Mrs. Vernice Battle?" There was a deep masculine voice. "This is Richard Stevenson, senior partner of Stevenson and Associates. I'm calling you about Albert Grayson's estate." It took my breath away. Albert Grayson was the owner of the Majestic Memphis, one of the city's most prestigious hotels. I'd worked for him for almost 20 years, working my way up from a regular maid to deputy manager. He was not just my boss, but a mentor, and over time, a close friend. We hadn't spoken in the last 5 years, ever since he'd retired and gone to Florida to recuperate. I knew he was seriously ill, but the news of his death still hit suddenly and painfully. "Albert is dead?" I asked quietly. "Yes, Mrs. Battle, 3 weeks ago. We tried to contact you at your last known address, but your son told us that you were now living at Quiet Harbor, so Torrance knew I was wanted and didn't see fit to tell me. Not surprising. Mr. Grayson left you some of his property," the lawyer continued. "It's a controlling interest in the Majestic Memphis Hotel. According to his last will, you become the majority owner of the hotel." I felt my knees buckle, and I sank into the nearest chair. Albert had left me his hotel? It seemed unbelievable. "Yeah, I don't understand," I mumbled. "Why me? He has a son." Jeffrey Grayson received the other part of the inheritance, a country house and a considerable sum of money. As for the hotel, Mr. Grayson was very specific in his will. He believed that only you could keep the spirit and tradition of the majestic Memphis alive. There is a personal letter in his will for you that explains his decision in more detail. When can I meet with you? I asked, beginning to recover from the shock. I can come to you tomorrow morning if that's okay with you, Mr. Stevenson offered. We'll discuss all the details and legal formalities. We agreed to meet at 10 o'clock the next day. I hung up the phone and sat still for a long time, trying to comprehend what had happened. Albert left me a controlling interest in his hotel. I, Vernice Battle, a woman whose own son had sent her to a cheap boarding house to live out her days, was suddenly the owner of one of the most prestigious establishments in Memphis. The irony of the situation didn't escape me. When Torrance and Rowena had decided to take away my apartment and send me here, they had no idea that I possessed a far more valuable asset than a small two-bedroom in an old house. The next morning, Mr. Stevenson arrived exactly at the appointed time. He was an elegant man in his 50s, in an impeccable suit. The administration gave us a small room to talk in, which usually served as the office of the doctor, who came once a week. Mrs. Battle, the lawyer began, laying a folder of papers on the table. First of all, let me give you a personal letter from Mr. Grayson. He handed me an envelope sealed with a wax seal with the initials AG. I opened it carefully and took out a folded piece of paper. Dear Vernice, if you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer alive. Don't be sad. I've lived a long and happy life, and now it's time for me to embark on my final journey. I decided to leave you a controlling interest in majestic Memphis for a reason. In your 20 years at the hotel, I have never met a person who loved it more, understood its soul more deeply, and cared for it with greater devotion. I know you have been retired for several years, and perhaps this gift will seem burdensome to you, but I also know that you've never been the type to take the easy way out. Majestic Memphis needs you, Vernice. It has lost its luster and uniqueness in recent years, becoming just another faceless hotel. I believe you can restore it to its former glory. You don't have to run it directly, just hire a good manager. But your taste, your vision, your understanding of what makes the hotel special is what it needs now. With love and faith in you, Albert Grayson. I felt tears come to my throat. Albert had always believed in me more than I believed in myself. Even after he died, he continued to support me, giving me a chance to start over. I should also inform you, Mr. Stevenson continued when I finished reading, that in addition to the controlling interest in the hotel, Mr. Grayson left you his share of the Grayson Hospitality Group, which operates several hotels throughout the South. It's not that big a stake, 20%, but it provides a steady income in the form of dividends. He handed me another document, a bank statement in the name of Albert Grayson. This account now also belongs to you. The amount in it should cover the initial cost of renovating the hotel, should you decide to do so. I looked at the number at the end of the statement and almost choked. $1.5 million. A sum I couldn't even dream of. Mr. Stevenson, I don't know what to say. There's nothing to say, Mrs. Battle. Mr. Grayson was absolutely certain of his decision. He often spoke of you as the only person who truly understands the hotel business. We spent another 2 hours discussing the details of the inheritance, signing the necessary documents, and planning my next steps. By the end of the meeting, I was determined that I would not stay at the quiet harbor a minute longer than necessary. Mr. Stevenson, how quickly can I take possession of my inheritance? I asked. It's all ready, Mrs. Battle. We've prepared the documents in advance. All that's left is to file them. By the end of the week, you'll be a full owner. In that case, I'd like to move into the hotel. I know there are a few apartments there for special guests. Of course, I'll call the manager and have the best suite prepared for you. When would you like to move in? As soon as possible. Today, if possible. By evening that day, I was already moving into the luxurious apartments of the majestic Memphis overlooking the Mississippi River. I was picked up by a private driver in an executive car, and I was met in the hotel lobby by the manager and a delegation of employees. Many of them remembered me from my work here, and their genuine joy at seeing me was a balm to my soul after the cold farewell at Quiet Harbor. Patricia Wilkins was frankly shocked when I informed her of my departure. She obviously couldn't understand how an old lady from a cheap boarding house suddenly found herself the owner of a famous hotel, and that gave me a special pleasure. I left her Mr. Stevenson's phone number in case Torrance or Rowena ever deigned to visit me, and left the Quiet Harbor without regret. My new suite at the hotel consisted of a spacious living room, a bedroom, a study, and a luxurious bathroom. The huge windows overlooked the river, and the interior was decorated in an elegant classic style, just the way I'd always liked it. After the shabby room at the boarding house, the contrast was particularly striking. The first thing I did when I got settled in was to call Gerta. She was overjoyed to hear my news. "Vernice, this is fantastic," she exclaimed. "You always deserved the best. And your son and his wife, well, they got what they deserved." "They don't know yet," I said, "and I'm not going to tell them. Let them find out for themselves when the time comes." For the next 2 weeks, I was fully immersed in the renovation of the hotel. I met with designers, architects, suppliers. I was delving into financial statements, building relationships with staff, developing a new concept. The energy I put into this work surprised even myself. It was like I was 20 years younger, back to the business I had always loved. The hotel really needed an update. It had lost its personality in recent years, becoming a typical high-end chain hotel. I wanted to bring back that special charm that made it unique during the Albert Grayson era. We completely remodeled the lobby, bringing back the classic style with elements of Southern hospitality. We renovated the restaurants, bars, and conference rooms. We paid special attention to detail, from the linens to the dishes in the restaurants. I knew that it is in the little things that true luxury is revealed. During those 2 weeks, I hadn't once thought about Torrance or Rowena, or rather, I tried not to. But sometimes, when I went to sleep in my luxurious bedroom overlooking the night lights of Memphis, I thought about what they'd done to me. The pain of betrayal never subsided, though it receded into the whirlwind of new events and experiences. We scheduled the grand opening of the renovated majestic Memphis for the 1st of next month, exactly 3 weeks after I had inherited the property. It was a bold move. Meeting such a tight deadline with renovations and upgrades was a challenge. But I felt there was no time or moment to lose. The hotel had to make a loud and confident statement. We sent invitations to all the important people of the city: politicians, businessmen, representatives of culture and art. We organized a press conference before the opening. I wanted this event to become a prominent part of Memphis life, to be talked about. The opening day was sunny and warm, a gift from fate. I stood at the hotel entrance, where the red ribbon had been placed, preparing for the ceremony. I was wearing the elegant blue dress that Gerda and I had chosen especially for the occasion, and I was holding the symbolic golden scissors. Journalists with cameras and microphones, guests in evening clothes, and curious passers-by crowded around. I saw many people looking at me with surprise. A gray-haired woman of age who suddenly found herself in the center of such a significant event. At exactly 6 o'clock in the evening, Mr. Stevenson, who served as the master of ceremonies, took the microphone and addressed the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we are present at a historic moment, the revival of the legendary hotel Majestic Memphis, under the leadership of its new owner, Mrs. Vernice Battle." Applause erupted. I took a step forward toward the microphone, and at that moment, through the crowd of guests, I saw them, Torrance and Rowena. They were standing at the very edge of the crowd, with an expression of absolute shock on their faces. Apparently, they'd seen the announcement of the ceremony on TV or the internet and had rushed over to make sure it was really me. Our eyes met, and I felt a wave of cold anger rising inside, but outwardly I remained completely calm. Smiling at the crowd, I began my speech. Good evening, dear guests. I am pleased to welcome you to the opening of the renovated Majestic Memphis. This hotel has a special meaning for me. It is where I began my career as a simple maid over 50 years ago. It's where I grew professionally under the guidance of the great Albert Grayson, who taught me everything I know about the hotel business. I paused, looking around the gathered crowd. Torrance and Rowena squeezed closer, still not believing their eyes. Life takes unexpected turns sometimes, I continued. Until a month ago, I was living in a modest boarding house for the elderly, where I'd been placed after I'd lost my home. I know what it is to be defenseless in old age, to be betrayed by those who were supposed to care for you. A whisper ran through the crowd. The journalists surged forward, sensing that the speech was taking an unexpected turn. That is why today I am announcing the establishment of a fund to support elderly people who have been victims of financial exploitation by their relatives. The foundation will be named Battle in honor of my family. I deliberately emphasized the last name, looking directly at Torrance and Rowena. Their faces turned pale. This foundation will provide legal and financial assistance to seniors who have been put in difficult situations because of the actions of their loved ones. We will help them recover illegally foreclosed properties, find decent housing, and get the care and support they need. The applause grew louder and louder. I saw some of the elderly guests nodding with understanding and approval. 10% of Majestic Memphis's profits will go to this fund each year. In addition, our hotel will create a special department of apartments for elderly people in difficult situations, a kind of counterbalance to those terrible boarding houses where they often send the elderly so as not to burden themselves with caring for them. I glanced at Torrance and Rowena, who seemed to want to fall through the ground. And now, I raised the golden scissors. I am pleased to declare Majestic Memphis open. I cut the red ribbon, and the crowd erupted in applause. Journalists surrounded me, pelting me with questions about my story, how I came to own the hotel, and the foundation's plans. I answered calmly and confidently, feeling my strength and confidence growing with each word. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Torrance and Rowena trying to squeeze through the crowd of reporters to me. Their faces expressed a mixture of shock, disbelief, and, most pleasing to see, fear. They had finally realized the mistake they had made in throwing me out of their lives. When the press conference was over and the guests began to make their way to the hotel lobby for the cocktail portion of the evening, Torrance finally made his way to me. Rowena followed him with a strained smile on her face. "Mom!" he exclaimed with fake enthusiasm. "What a surprise! Why didn't you tell us? We would have—" "You would have what, Torrance?" I interrupted him icily. "Wouldn't have sent me to that horrible boarding house? Wouldn't take away my apartment? Throw me out of your life like I was nothing?" "Mom, you've got it all wrong." Rowena intervened with the same fake smile. "We really only wanted the best for you." "Really?" I turned to the nearest journalist, who was still holding the microphone. "Do you know what the main purpose of creating the Battle Foundation is?" "To protect the elderly from people like my son and his wife, who tricked me into signing over my apartment to them and then sent me to a cheap boarding house that didn't even have a private bathroom." The journalist turned with interest to Torrance and Rowena, who were frozen with a look of horror on their faces. "Mrs. Battle?" Are you saying that you are the victim of financial abuse by your own family? He asked. That's exactly what I'm saying. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. Many elderly people experience this kind of treatment. That's why I'm starting this foundation to help them fight for their rights and dignity. Torrance grabbed my arm, trying to pull me away from the reporter. Mom, stop it. You don't know what you're doing, he hissed. No, Torrance, I pulled my hand free. You didn't realize what you were doing when you decided to get rid of me. And now you're going to live with the consequences of your actions. I turned my back on him and headed toward the other guests, leaving Torrance and Rowena standing in the middle of the hall with a look of utter confusion and horror on their faces. They had finally realized that their plan had backfired on them, and now they would have to face the consequences of their betrayal. The next morning, I awoke in my luxurious suite to the sound of a light knock on the door. It was Franklin, my personal assistant, who had joined the hotel team only a week ago. A tall, trim man in his 40s, with an attentive gaze and impeccable manners, he was exactly the person I needed to coordinate all my new responsibilities. Good morning, Mrs. Battle, he said, entering with a tray containing a cup of fragrant coffee and a fresh morning paper. How did you sleep? Fine, Franklin, thank you, I replied, taking the coffee. What news do we have today? Yesterday's discovery caused quite a sensation, he said with a smile. All the local papers are talking about you and the Battle Foundation. Take a look. He put the newspaper in front of me, unfolded on a page with the headline, Vernice Battle's Triumphant Return, From Boarding House to Luxury Hotel Ownership. Under the headline was a picture of me cutting the red ribbon. I looked proud and confident, not like the broken woman Torrance and Rowena had sent to Quiet Harbor only a month before. The article detailed the story of my ascent from humble maid to owner of majestic Memphis. Special attention was paid to the creation of the Battle Foundation and my public disclosure of financial abuse by my own son. The reporter didn't name Torrance and Rowena, but described the situation in enough detail that anyone who knew our family could easily figure out who was in question. Mrs. Battle has become a voice for those who usually go unheard, the article's author wrote. Her courage in publicly admitting that she herself was a victim of financial abuse at the hands of loved ones opens a new chapter in the discussion of an issue that has remained in the shadows for too long. In addition, Franklin continued, we already have over 300 requests for room reservations for the coming months. That's double what we had before the rebranding, and we've also had 6 corporate clients interested in hosting their events. That's great news. I nodded, sipping my coffee. And what about requests to the foundation? 27 inquiries in one morning, Franklin replied, mostly from elderly people who were in a difficult situation because of their relatives' actions. I've already contacted Mr. Stevenson's law firm, and they're willing to provide us with 2 specialists for consultation. I nodded, feeling the warmth inside me as I realized that my actions were already beginning to make a real difference. Creating the foundation wasn't just an act of revenge against Torrance and Rowena. It was something much bigger, something truly important and necessary. And, Franklin faltered slightly, your son has called 3 times this morning. He insists on seeing you in person. I told him you were busy, but he keeps calling. I felt the smile slip from my face. Of course Torrance wouldn't leave me alone after yesterday. Now that he realized I was no longer a helpless old woman, but a powerful man with money and connections, he'd probably want back into my life. He might even try to convince me that what happened was a misunderstanding or for my own good. If he calls again, tell him I'm away on hotel business, I said firmly. I'm not ready to talk to him, at least not yet. Franklin nodded understandingly and left me to eat breakfast alone. I continued reading the newspaper, finding more and more references to yesterday's event and the foundation that had been set up. My heart was filled with pride, not vain pride, but that special pride that comes with the realization that you are doing something truly important and necessary. After breakfast, I went down to the hotel lobby to check in personally to see how things were going on the first day after opening. I wanted to be in the loop, to see guests' reactions, to hear their comments. Even though we had a great manager and a professional team, I knew that my personal supervision and involvement was necessary, especially in the initial phase. The lobby was bustling with activity. New guests were checking in at the counter. Tourists were taking pictures against the elegant interior, and the staff moved with that special graceful efficiency that distinguishes the best hotels in the world. I noted with satisfaction that everything was going exactly as I had imagined. I was approached by the manager, Mr. Dawson, an experienced hotelier whom I had decided to retain after taking ownership. He had worked here for over 10 years and knew the hotel like the back of his hand. Mrs. Battle, we're fully booked for today and all weekend, he said with a smile. That hasn't happened in a long time. Your performance last night was a real sensation. I'm glad, Mr. Dawson, but let's focus on meeting the expectations of our guests. Reputations are not built on grand pronouncements, but on impeccable service. He nodded respectfully. I liked that despite the age difference, he was about 15 years younger than me. Mr. Dawson didn't treat me like an old lady to be patronized, but like a professional and a business owner. We discussed a few business matters, and I was about to head back upstairs to my suite when I noticed a familiar face at the hotel entrance. It was Helen Reynolds, an old friend of Rowena's whom I had met several times at family events. She was standing at the concierge desk, asking an employee about something, and hadn't noticed me yet. I could have discreetly walked away, avoiding the encounter, but I decided not to hide. After all, this was my hotel, and I had nothing to be ashamed of. I walked toward Helen, who, when she saw me, froze with a look of genuine surprise on her face. "Vernice," she exclaimed, "is that really you?" "Hello, Helen," I replied calmly. "It's good to see you at the majestic Memphis. What can I do for you?" "Yeah, I just—" She clearly didn't know what to say. "I heard about the discovery yesterday, but I couldn't believe it was actually you. Rowena told me that you were, in a boarding house for the elderly?" "I was," I nodded. "Until recently. Life is full of surprises, isn't it?" Helen looked around nervously, clearly feeling uncomfortable. "Vernice, I have to say, what happened to you is terrible. I never thought Rowena and Torrance were capable of such a thing. They always seemed so caring," I prompted with a touch of irony. "Yes, exactly." Helen nodded. "Rowena was always telling me how worried they were about you, how they wanted to give you the best care. And now everyone's saying—" "Saying what exactly?" I asked, trying to keep my tone calm. Helen looked away again, as if afraid we might be overheard. "It's all we talk about in our circle, after yesterday's news. A lot of people are shocked. You know, Mary Perkins canceled Rowena's invitation to the fundraiser next Saturday, and James and Lisa Burke seem to have stopped returning their calls altogether. I didn't feel the satisfaction I might have expected. Revenge had never been my goal. I wanted justice and restoration of my dignity, but not social isolation for Torrance and Rowena. They chose their own path, though, when they chose to do to me what they did." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said neutrally. "I hope this situation will be a lesson to everyone about the importance of treating the elderly with respect and care." "Absolutely," Helen agreed hastily. "You know, I've always told Rowena that she should spend more time with her family, especially the older ones." She paused, apparently realizing how that sounded. "Anyway, I'm very happy for you, Vernice. You look beautiful. And this hotel, it's just terrific." We exchanged a few more sentences before Helen hurriedly said goodbye, citing business. I glanced at her, realizing that our conversation was likely to be shared with their entire social circle, including Rowena. So be it. When I returned to my apartment, I found a message from Franklin saying that Torrance had come in person and left a letter. The envelope was on the coffee table, a plain white envelope with my name on it in familiar handwriting. I stared at it for a long time, hesitant to open it. Part of me wanted to tear it up without reading it, to throw it out of my life the way they had thrown me out. But the other part, wiser and calmer, realized that I needed to know what he'd written in order to move on. Finally, I opened the envelope and unfolded the folded piece of paper. Dear Mom, I know you probably don't want to talk to me, so I'm writing this letter. First of all, I want to say that I am immensely sorry for the way Rowena and I treated you. It was unforgivable, and I am not looking for excuses. I'm not asking for forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it, but I want you to know that I have realized my mistake and am willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. Rowena and I have already contacted a lawyer to get your apartment back. All the paperwork will be ready within a week. Please give me a chance to apologize to you in person. I'll be waiting for your call or message. Your son, Torrance. I reread the letter several times, trying to figure out how I felt. Anger, sadness, satisfaction. All of these emotions mixed inside me, making it hard to pinpoint any one emotion. Torrance was admitting his guilt. That was good. He was offering to give the apartment back. That was good too. But was he sincere, or was he just afraid of public judgment and possible legal repercussions? I put the letter aside, deciding I wouldn't respond to it immediately. I needed time to sort out my feelings and make an informed decision. Forgiveness should not be rushed, or it would be devalued. The next few days passed in nonstop work. I became completely immersed in running the hotel and developing the Battle Foundation. We hired 2 attorneys specializing in elder law and began reviewing the first appeals. The stories I heard were heartbreaking. Elderly men and women cheated, abandoned, robbed of their property and dignity by their own children or other relatives. Each such case reinforced my conviction that establishing the foundation was the right decision. It was not just my personal revenge against Torrance and Rowena, but something much more. A real help to those who found themselves in a situation similar to mine, but did not have the same opportunities as I did. Torrance kept trying to contact me. He called, came to the hotel, left messages. Rowena joined in these efforts as well, sending a huge bouquet of flowers with a note full of apologies and requests to meet. I didn't respond to any of this, continuing to remain silent. On the 4th day after the opening, Gerda, who had moved to Memphis to help me with the foundation, stopped by my office. We hadn't seen each other for a few days, and I was glad to have her visit. Vernice, you look tired, she said, looking at me carefully. You need more rest. Too much to do, I replied, leaning back in my chair. The hotel, the foundation, all these interviews and meetings. And Torrance, Gerda added. I know he keeps coming after you. I sighed. Yes, he hasn't given up trying. He sent another letter this morning. He says that he and Rowena have broken up, that he has realized his mistakes and wants to make things right. And you believe him? Gerda asked, raising an eyebrow. I shook my head. I don't. Part of me wants to believe that he is truly remorseful. After all, he is my son, my blood. But another part remembers how easily he betrayed me, how quietly he sent me to that horrible boarding house. Goethe nodded understandingly. You don't have to make a decision right now. Give yourself some time. Focus on the good things, on how your life has changed, on how many people you can now help through your foundation. She was right, as always. My life really has changed dramatically in the last month. I went from being a forgotten old lady in a cheap boarding house to a respected businesswoman, owner of a prestigious hotel, and founder of a charitable foundation. Journalists interviewed me, politicians invited me to receptions, businessmen sought meetings to discuss possible cooperation. But the main change happened inside me. I no longer felt unwanted, forgotten, thrown to the margins of life. I found purpose, meaning, energy again. I knew I could make a difference, and that knowledge gave me the strength to move forward despite the fatigue and emotional trauma of the past. That evening, I decided to walk around the hotel to check in personally to see how things were going. I went down to the restaurant where the guests were dining, talked to the chef about the new menu, checked on the bar and lobby. Everywhere I was greeted with respect and attention, not as an elderly woman to be patronized, but as an owner and professional whose opinion is valuable and important. When I returned to my apartment, I felt a strange calmness. Despite all the complexities and challenges of the last few weeks, I was in my place. I was doing what I knew and loved to do, and it was satisfying. I walked to the window, looking out at the nightlights of Memphis. The city seemed alive, pulsing, full of possibility. And I was part of that life, part of that rhythm, not an echo of the past, not a burden on the young, but a full-fledged active participant in the present. The phone on my bedside table rang, disrupting my thoughts. I picked it up, expecting to hear Franklin's voice or someone from the hotel staff. "Mrs. Battle?" An unfamiliar female voice called out. "My name is Emily Carter. I'm a journalist from the Memphis Daily. We're doing a big story on elder financial abuse and would like to interview you as the founder of the Battle Foundation. Your story is an inspiration to many, and we feel it is a story that needs to be heard." I thought for a moment. Another interview, another opportunity to spread the word, to bring attention to those in difficult situations. Perhaps it would help someone find the strength to fight, to not give up, to demand respect and decent treatment. "Yes, Miss Carter," I finally answered. "I'm willing to give you an interview. Let's make an appointment for tomorrow." We agreed on a time, and I hung up the phone, feeling strangely satisfied. My story, painful as it was becoming more than just a personal drama. It was becoming a tool for change, a way to help others. I lay in bed thinking about how my life had turned in the last month, from utter despair to new opportunities, from oblivion to recognition and respect. It was a journey I hadn't planned or expected to take in my 73 years, but it brought me to where I needed to be, to a new chapter of my life, full of meaning, purpose, and opportunities to help others. As I fell asleep, I thought about Torrance and his letters. Maybe one day I would find the strength to talk to him, maybe even forgive not for his sake, but for my own, to free myself from the weight of anger and resentment. But not now. Right now, I needed to focus on the present, on this new life that was just beginning for me. It had been 2 weeks since the grand opening of the renovated Majestic Memphis. In that time, my life had become a veritable whirlwind of events, meetings, interviews, talks, charity events. The Battle Foundation has received an increasing number of referrals from seniors who are victims of financial exploitation by relatives. We had already helped 5 of them to recover illegally foreclosed property and find decent housing. That morning, I had a meeting with the Foundation's legal team in the hotel conference room. We were discussing the most difficult cases and strategies for assistance when Franklin quietly entered the room and leaned toward me. "Mrs. Battle, I'm sorry to bother you, but your son and his wife are waiting for you in the lobby. They say it's very important and won't leave until they talk to you." I felt my shoulders tense. Torrance kept trying to contact me, calls, letters, messages through mutual acquaintances, but so far he hadn't dared to just come and wait for me in the hotel lobby. "Tell them I'm busy," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "If they want to make an appointment, have them contact you and make an appointment like everyone else." Franklin nodded and walked out, and I tried to focus on the discussion. But my thoughts kept returning to Torrance and Rowena waiting for me downstairs. What did they want? Another apology? Or something more specific? Half an hour later, the meeting was over, and I went up to my suite, careful not to go through the main lobby. I wasn't ready to meet my son and daughter-in-law, not now that I had so many important things to do. But that evening, when I returned from the restaurant after dinner with potential investors for the foundation, Torrance and Rowena were still there. They were sitting in two deep armchairs by the fireplace, looking tired and tense. Rowena was saying something to Torrance, gesturing nervously, and he was listening with an absent look. I could have avoided seeing them again, but I decided it was time to put an end to this situation. I walked toward them, and they jumped up when they saw me. "Mama!" exclaimed Torrance, clearly relieved. "At last! We've been waiting for you all day." "What do you want?" I asked bluntly, wasting no time with greetings. Rowena took a step forward, holding out a folder of documents to me. "Vernice, we've come to return your apartment to you," she said, and there was an unfamiliar softness in her voice. "Here, all the documents are ready. All you need is your signature, and the apartment will belong to you again." I took the folder without opening it. "And that's it?" I asked, looking at them. "No, Mom, of course not," Torrance said hurriedly. "We've come to apologize. What we did, it's unforgivable. We did a terrible thing, and we both realize that now. Please give us a chance to make it right." I looked at them carefully. Torrance looked genuinely remorseful, with pain and regret in his eyes. Rowena seemed more frightened than guilty. I could see her looking around nervously, as if afraid that someone she knew might see them here, in the hotel that was now mine. "Fix it?" I interjected. "And how are you going to do that?" "The apartment is only the beginning," Rowena said. "We are ready to compensate for all the moral suffering you have gone through. Money, of course, won't make up for lost time, but—" "Money," I grinned. "Do you really think it's about money? You took away not only the roof over my head, but my dignity, my self-respect, my faith in people. You've treated me like a thing that you can get rid of when it gets uncomfortable. And now you think you can just give me my apartment back and everything will go back to the way it was?" Torrance lowered his eyes. "We realize we've hurt you deeply, Mother, and we're willing to do whatever it takes to earn your forgiveness. Please give us a chance." I looked at the file folder in my hands. This apartment had once meant so much to me, my home, my sanctuary, a place filled with memories. But now it was just a piece of real estate whose value was minuscule compared to what I had now. "I don't need this apartment," I finally said. "I have a home, a job, a purpose in life. Things you tried to take from me, but couldn't." I handed the folder back to Rowena. "As for forgiveness, I'm not sure I'm ready to give it. Not now, anyway." "Mom, please." Torrance's voice sounded desperate. "You can't just cut us out of your life. We're your family." "Family?" I looked him straight in the eye. "Family doesn't throw their old people away like junk. Family doesn't manipulate, cheat, or betray. What you did has nothing to do with family values." "We made a mistake," Torrance said quietly. "People make mistakes, but we're truly sorry and we want to make it right." I looked at them and realized that their remorse had come too late. Not because I couldn't forgive. I've always believed that the ability to forgive makes us stronger, but because their remorse was not because they realized their guilt, but because they feared public condemnation and possible legal repercussions. "I can see that you're remorseful," I said finally, "and I accept your apology. But that doesn't mean I'm ready to go back to the way things were. I need time to think things over." Torrance's face brightened. "That's all we're asking for, Mom. Time and a chance to prove we've changed." Rowena nodded, but in her eyes I saw calculation, not relief. She was already figuring out how to use the situation to her advantage. how to present it to the world to regain her lost position in society. You can keep the apartment, I said, gesturing away from the folder I held out. Or sell it and donate the money to the Battle Foundation. That would be a fitting atonement. Rowena flinched, clearly not expecting such a suggestion. Torrance, however, nodded slowly. That's exactly what we'll do, Mother. We'll sell the apartment and donate all the money to your foundation. It's the least we can do. I looked at my son, trying to see if he was sincere. There was determination in his eyes, but was it genuine remorse or just a desire to win back my affection? Okay, I said. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a lot to do today. I turned to leave, but Torrance grabbed my arm. Mom, please don't go like that. We have a lot to talk about. Perhaps we could have dinner together, or just have tea? I gently released my hand. Not now, Torrance. I said I need time, and I'm asking you to respect that decision. I could see him fighting the urge to insist, but he finally nodded. Of course, Mom. We'll wait as long as it takes. I walked away without looking back, feeling their gazes on my back. A storm of emotions raged inside me. Rage, regret, fatigue, a sliver of hope that maybe Torrance had really changed. But on top of it all lay the firm conviction that I was doing the right thing by taking my time to reconcile. I woke up the next day with a clear head and a firm decision. During the night, as I reflected on my encounter with Torrance and Rowena, I realized that I wanted to make my experience even more meaningful, to turn it into a tool to help other seniors in similar situations. I called Emily Carter, a journalist who had already interviewed me for her article on elder financial abuse. Ms. Carter, I have a proposal, I said without preamble. I am willing to give you a full, in-depth interview about my personal experience of financial abuse by my family. No cuts, no mitigation, with all names and circumstances mentioned. But with one condition, part of the article must be about expanding the Bettel Foundation program. Emily was thrilled with the offer. We made an appointment to meet that same day. The interview lasted almost 3 hours. I detailed how Torrance and Rowena had manipulated me into signing over the apartment to them, how they had sent me to that horrible boarding house, how they had not visited or called me. I described my feelings, humiliation, pain, betrayal, despair, but also how I found the strength to fight, how I received my inheritance from Albert Grayson, and how I decided to use my new status to help others. What drove you to create the foundation? Emily asked. A desire for revenge against your son and daughter-in-law? I shook my head. Revenge is a destructive emotion that hurts the one who nurtures it in the first place. No, not revenge. Rather, a desire to turn my negative experience into something useful, to give hope to those who find themselves in a similar situation but do not have the same opportunities as me. And what exactly is the help of your foundation? We provide legal support to elderly people who are victims of financial exploitation by their relatives. We help them to return illegally alienated property, find decent housing, get the necessary care and support. But more importantly, we let them know that they are not alone, that their voices will be heard, that their dignity and rights will be protected. I told about plans to expand the Foundation's program, opening a 24-hour hotline for elderly people in crisis, creating a network of temporary housing for those who have nowhere to go, organizing psychological support for victims of financial violence. These are ambitious plans, Emily remarked. Where do you plan to get funding from? 10% of Majestic Memphis's profits go to the foundation every year, I replied. In addition, we have already received several large private donations after the first publications about our work, and I hope this article will garner even more attention and support. Emily nodded, making notes in her notebook. And how did your son and his wife react to the creation of the foundation? Did they try to contact you after that memorable speech at the hotel opening? I told them about Torrance and Rowena's visit yesterday, about their attempts to get the apartment back and earn forgiveness. And you refused to reconcile? Emily asked. I'm not ready for a full reconciliation, I answered honestly. Perhaps in time, but right now I'm focused on growing the foundation and helping those who need it. I finally have a purpose, a meaning, a job that's satisfying, and I don't want anything to distract me from that. After the interview, I felt a strange sense of relief, as if by telling my story fully, without secrecy, I had been freed from the heaviness I had been carrying around. Perhaps this is the first step to true forgiveness, not forgetting the offense, but accepting it and turning it into something constructive. The article came out 2 days later and had a bombshell effect. The full version of my story, with names, dates, details, caused a wave of responses. The Foundation's phones were ringing off the hook with calls from other victims of financial abuse, wanting to share their stories, journalists looking for commentary, philanthropists offering support. But the most unexpected call was from Glenn, my grandson. He had never called me on his own before, only when his parents made him wish his grandmother a happy birthday or Christmas. Grandma? His voice sounded unsure. It's me, Glenn. Glenn? I was genuinely surprised. How are you? I'm fine, he answered after a pause. I read the article about you. What Dad and Mom did. It's awful. I didn't know. They said you wanted to move to that boarding house, that you'd be better off there. I felt a lump come up in my throat. Of course, Torrance and Rowena hadn't told their son the truth about what they'd done to me. It's a difficult situation, Glenn, I said softly. Adults make mistakes sometimes. It's not just a mistake, Grandma. It's a betrayal. I'm so angry with them, especially after seeing that boarding house on the news. It's a shithole. I heard the hurt and anger in his voice and realized that my grandson, who I thought was lost to me, really just didn't know the truth. Glenn, I don't want you to hate your parents because of this. They're sorry for what they did. Just because you're rich and famous now, he exclaimed with youthful maximalism. If it weren't for that, they would have left you there to rot. We can't know that for sure, I replied, though deep down I was inclined to agree with his assessment. The important thing is that now they have realized their mistake and are trying to correct it. Can I come to your place? Glenn asked suddenly. Just for a visit, to see the hotel, maybe over the weekend? I was touched by the request. Of course, Glenn, I'd love to see you. Come Saturday and I'll show you the hotel and tell you about the foundation. After talking to my grandson, I sat in my office for a long time, looking at the nightlights of the city outside my window. Perhaps not all is lost in my relationship with my family. Perhaps through Glenn, through his genuine interest and sympathy, I could find a way to reconcile with Torrance. But it would have to happen naturally, without falsity or manipulation, on the basis of genuine remorse and a desire to change. In the meantime, I had work to do, important, necessary, and capable of changing the lives of many people for the better, and I intended to devote all my energy and experience to it. That same evening, I received a phone call from Mr. Stevenson. Mrs. Battle, I have an interesting proposal for you. The governor of the state is forming a special commission to protect the rights of the elderly, and he would like to see you among its members. It would be a great honor and an opportunity to influence legislative initiatives in this area. I didn't hesitate for a minute. Of course, I agree. This is a great opportunity to expand the impact of our foundation and bring attention to the issue at the state level. We discussed the details and I hung up the phone, feeling a surge of energy and enthusiasm. I was transforming from a victim to an advocate, from a helpless old lady to a respected public figure. It was a transformation I could never have foreseen, but one that gave me a new meaning to life at an age when many people give up and live out their days in quiet oblivion. The next day, I did another interview, this time for a national television station. The journalist, a young woman with intelligent eyes, asked deep, thoughtful questions without trying to turn my story into a cheap sensation. "You have become a symbol of resistance for many older people," she said at the end of the interview. "What would you like to say to those who find themselves in a situation like yours, but don't have the same opportunities?" I thought for a moment. I would like to tell them that age is not a judgment, that they deserve respect, dignity, a voice, that they shouldn't let anyone, even those closest to them, treat them like a burden or an unnecessary thing. And most importantly, that they are not alone. There are people, organizations that are willing to help. The Battle Foundation is just one example, and we will expand our activities to help as many elderly people as possible to defend their rights and their dignity. The journalist nodded respectfully. "You are an amazing woman, Mrs. Battle. Instead of breaking under the weight of betrayal, you found the strength to not only rebuild your life, but to help others. That's inspiring." I smiled. "You know what the secret is? It's to never let others define your worth, even if it's the people closest to you. Your life belongs to you alone, and only you decide how to live it, regardless of your age, health, or circumstances." After the interview, I returned to my office where a mountain of emails and messages from people who had read Emily's article were waiting for me. I started going through them, making notes for my assistants who needed legal advice, who needed emotional support, who needed help finding a place to live. I felt I had finally found my purpose, to be a voice for those who had gone unheard for too long. And even though the road to this was long and painful, including the betrayal of those closest to me, I had no regrets. Because it was this experience that made me realize how important it is to fight for one's dignity and rights, regardless of age and circumstances. 6 months have passed since the opening of the renovated Majestic Memphis and the creation of the Battle Foundation. Winter has replaced spring and then summer. Warm sunlight filled my spacious office on the top floor of the hotel, where I spent most of my working hours. A lot had changed in those months. The Battle Foundation has become a well-known and respected organization that has already helped more than 100 seniors who have suffered financial abuse at the hands of relatives. The majestic Memphis has flourished under my leadership, becoming one of the most popular and prestigious hotels in the region. But the biggest change occurred in my personal life. I found a new family, not by blood, but by spirit and shared values. The hotel staff, the foundation team, the people we helped, they all became much closer to me than Torrance and Rowena ever were. That morning, I was hosting the hotel's monthly management meeting in the conference room. We were discussing the past month's results and plans for the future. "Profits were up 15% over last month," reported Franklin, who was now the chief financial officer. "This means that contributions to the fund will also increase." Mr. Dawson, the hotel manager, offered to allocate part of the room stock to temporarily house the foundation's wards who were homeless. I was touched by this offer. It was moments like this that made me feel that I had found my place, my real family. After the meeting, I was approached by Lisa Chen, the chief lawyer of the foundation, a young, energetic woman with a sharp mind and a kind heart. She told me about a new mentee whose story was so similar to my own. "Where is she now?" I asked. "Still in that nursing home. She called our hotline last night after she saw a report about the foundation on TV. Send someone to see her today. I want her moved to a hotel as soon as possible." Lisa also reported that Torrance came by again and left an envelope for me. I picked it up but didn't bother to open it. Torrance hadn't given up trying to contact me all these months, but I remained adamant. It wasn't about revenge or vindictiveness. It was just that I realized that toxic relationships, even with people close to my blood, are not worth the emotional price you have to pay for them. After lunch with the Foundation's mentees, I returned to my office to find Franklin waiting for me with a worried expression on her face. Mrs. Battle, your son and daughter in law are waiting at the office door. They refuse to leave until they speak to you. I sighed. That moment was bound to come sooner or later. Well, it was time to end it. Send them in. Torrance and Rowena didn't look as glossy and confident as they used to. Torrance had lost weight. There were shadows under his eyes, and his always impeccable suit seemed wrinkled. Rowena, too, looked pale and haggard. Mother, Torrance began, we must talk. This can't go on indefinitely. Sit down, I said calmly, and let's really talk, once and for all. Mom, we realize we've hurt you. We're sorry and we're willing to do anything to earn your forgiveness, but you're not giving us a chance. What did you expect? That I'd just forget how you swindled me out of my apartment and sent me to that horrible boarding house? We have changed, Vernice, Rowena intervened. This situation has made us reassess our values. Torrance and I broke up, she added quietly, 3 months ago. It was unexpected. I looked at them carefully, trying to see if they were telling the truth. You know, I've learned a lot about myself and life in those months, I said finally. I realized that dignity and self-respect are more important than any family ties, that a true family is not necessarily those to whom you are related by blood, but those who treat you with love and respect. I paused. I hold no grudges against you. I'm even grateful in a way for what happened, because it led me to a new, better life, but I'm not ready to go back to a relationship that caused me so much pain. Maybe someday, in time, but not now. Mom, please, Torrance's voice trembled. Give us at least a small chance. No, Torrance, I've made my decision, and I ask you to honor it. There's no room in my life for you right now. What about Glenn? He's your grandson. He misses you. Glenn can come visit me anytime he wants. He and I have a great relationship, and he, unlike you, understands and respects my feelings and decisions. Rowena put her hand on Torrance's shoulder, stopping him. We understand, Vernice. We won't bother you again. But if you ever change your mind, we'll be waiting. They stood up, preparing to leave. I got up too. Goodbye, E. Good luck to you both. That evening, I hosted Glenn, who was now a regular weekend visitor. We had dinner in my apartment, discussing his schoolwork. Grandma, Dad said you talked to him today. Yes, he and Rowena came to my office. And you told them you didn't want to see them again? There was no judgment in his voice. I told them there was no room in my life for them now. Maybe someday that will change, but not now. Glenn nodded thoughtfully. I understand. After everything they've done, I wouldn't want to see them in your place either. I smiled, touched by his support. You know, Glenn, sometimes the hardest decision is to let go of people who hurt you, even if you love them. It doesn't mean you hate them. It's just that you're choosing your well-being and your mental health. I'm glad you're doing well now, Grandma. You seem happy. And what you're doing for other seniors through your foundation is really cool. After dinner, we went down to the hotel's rooftop garden. The lights of Memphis spread out before us like a scattering of gems. That evening, standing on the roof of the hotel with my grandson, looking out at the lights of the city, I felt truly free. Free from the pain of the past, from the fear of the future, from false obligations, to those who didn't deserve my love and care. Torrance and Rowena had lost everything, the respect of those around them, their social status, their relationships with each other and with me. Their reputations were ruined, but I felt no satisfaction at their downfall. I simply lived my life, full of meaning and joy, free of toxic relationships and false values. Life went on, full of new possibilities, and I was ready to take whatever it offered me with an open heart and a clear mind. Because now I knew for sure that age is not a judgment, but just another stage of the journey. And this stage can be one of the brightest and most meaningful if you don't let others decide how you live your life and how you feel.